my name is Bren. Today I'm going to go through every course and module I took at the University of Amsterdam as an English major. I will leave a link above to the video in which I talked about my sort of introductory courses, going through each course methodically and what we learned and what we read. And I'm going to go through now the remaining courses of my English degree, and I wanted to do this because I want to encourage anyone out there that cannot afford to go to university or doesn't have the time or resources in one way or another, or doesn't live in a country where there is funding for students. I wanted to make this video to show you that all of these resources pretty much are available online in one form or another for free or for relatively small sums of money. Yeah, what you can also do is use this course outline that I'm going to go through and customize and design your own journey through the great works of literature. I have been to university and attained 2 degrees, but so much of what I have learned and continue to learn is through my autodidactic passion, my passion to teach myself and grow as a reader and a writer and a thinker. And I would encourage anyone watching this to not feel disheartened if you cannot, for whatever reason, enroll at a university, but you have a desire to read and study the great works on an elite level. It's something really much more within your grasp than you may realize. So without further ado, let's go through these courses. I will just say as a caveat, by going through these modules, I'm not implying that this particular program is better or worse than any other program. It's just the one that I did, that I'm the most familiar with, and that I was quite satisfied with in terms of it's giving me a strong foundation upon which to build my own learning. So without further ado, okay, so as I said, I'll leave a link to the video that I did covering this first year program, and you can check that out. But we're going to look at the year 2 and 3, which is really majoring in English language and culture. That is the name of the course, but it's another way of basically saying that it's an English literature degree. So we've got semester 1 and semester 2 here. We're not going to worry about the credits so much, but we start with English literature 4, which was the 19th century. So a very, very important century in terms of the literary tradition. There was a huge amount of industrialization going on in Britain and its ever expanding colonies, and as well as a lot of most of Western Europe was also going through some varying stage of industrialization, and of course over the Atlantic in the United States as well. And the writers of that period really were, understandably concerned with this massive influx of factories and debilitating working conditions and child labor and environmental pollution and the increasing might of the major European powers and their subjugation of much of the global south in the 19th century. So this course provides an overview of English literature in the 19th century, focusing on Romantic and Victorian Britain, traces the development of some of its most significant debates, movements, and genres. We begin by considering how early 19th century writers developed new responses to questions about nature, self, and society. So this very idea about nature as this kind of what the ecological philosopher Timothy Morton calls, over yonder, this nature over there, just sort of at arm's reach, that we can kind of keep neatly over there, preserved, and we can retreat to escape our woes and our alienation if we have that luxury. But we have the urban and the kind of rural, this very new dichotomy and quite, I suppose, ironically, manufactured idea of nature as this thing over yonder that is kind of untamed or wild or unsophisticated and undomesticated in some way, but that binary is actually misleading, because already the environmental impact was so enormous, and those kind of green spaces were already kind of contaminated and manipulated in ways that we're still very much feeling the effect of today. So the writers of this period started to deal with these questions. And so there was a lot of social and political thinking that was being woven into the fiction writing of the day as well. The novel was really booming. Like I said, topics around class, urbanization, empire, race, evolution, and gender roles, among other topics. So study material: Jane Austen, Pride and Prejudice, of course, 1813 edition, Charlotte Bronte, Jane Eyre, and then several extracts and excerpts from the Norton Anthology of English Literature. After the 19th century, we then move into the modernist period, more or less, and this is kind of this is covered in the course English Literature 5, Modern and Contemporary Literature, it's called, and understanding the aesthetics of modernism and postmodernism, but also, of course, moving from text to context, i.e. the wider cultural and intellectual history of that period, and then back to applying those historical insights to the text in question to gain a deeper understanding and to unlock the interpretive potentialities of examining a text from that period. We must remember that whenever we are engaging with a work of literature from a previous time period, we are practicing history, because it may be fictional, but it is a cultural object that is representative of a certain time and place, and that is something to keep in mind when analyzing these things. We should not be hastily dismissive of works from a different time period just because their moral zeitgeist or their particular conception of acceptable behavior is something alien and repugnant to us. We don't have to agree with those viewpoints or those prejudices or those modes of expression, but we can analyze them and learn from them and extract value from the practice of reading historical texts without throwing them out entirely. That's very important. So this course moves between text and context in the modernist movement, and then what came after it, which was the postmodernist movement, although it's a bit more of an amorphous term. So become adept in responding sensitively, imaginatively, and creatively to the unique features of the various textual forms, and to refine students' ability to communicate that response effectively in both oral and written form. Modernism is this kind of broad umbrella term used to categorize a certain part of the English literary tradition that emerged sort of towards the end of the 19th century and into the early 20th century, and very much came to prominence around the First World War and the interwar years. And modernists were kind of known to be experimental in style, very elusive and elusive at times, and radically bent on reshaping the coherence and smooth delivery of received traditional forms were very much thrown into question and thrown into very abrasive new experimental forms. So that is just kind of a small part of modernism. The reason that they did this was because they felt that in the wake of the First World War, in the wake of industrialism, in the kind of breakthroughs in psychology and philosophy and the kind of secularization of Europe, there was a real disillusionment with the tradition and the traditional explication of the human condition, that these old, outdated forms had become stale, they didn't capture, they didn't express, they didn't evoke the alienation and radical dislocation of individual experience and the devastations of the war and of big city life and of the destruction of the environment and the new ideas around time and space and the theory of relativity and Freud's sort of reconception of the psyche, and all of these very rupturing, disruptive forces needed a new way of being expressed, and that's what the modernists set out to do. So it was very influential, of course. James Joyce, Virginia Woolf, T.S. Eliot, Ezra Pound, among many, many others, left a huge lasting impression on the literary tradition. And yeah, we looked at T.S. Eliot's The Wasteland, some poems from the American modernist Wallace Stevens and Elizabeth Bishop, Samuel Beckett, and this kind of the theater of the absurd, Virginia Woolf, Mrs. Dalloway, one of my favorite books of all time. So yeah, really, really good course, very crucial, sort of moving beyond modernism then into postmodernism, which is more or less contemporary, and then the contemporary moment as well. Postmodernism with this kind of obsession with sort of linguistic reflexivity, a lot of meta play and sort of hoodwinking and literary practices that have become a little bit stale and gimmicky. As I said, all of the stuff is available online. You can find lectures on YouTube. I will add some links below to some great free lectures and study programs. I will leave links to all of these texts and books that I'm talking about, and you can follow my video and play around with that to design your own program of study to take you through the literary tradition. Then we did a text in focus. This is important for the practice of close reading, which came to prominence around the time of the modernists, sort of in conjunction with the modernists. There was this kind of new criticism, which was a really focus on textual analysis and trying to be as rigorous and even scientific as possible. And that practice has very much remained in the world of scholarly engagement and research with literature. You need to read closely. You need to not waffle in purple, flowery language about the kind of abstract ideas of, spiritual enlightenment or whatever. You need to provide evidence. You need to provide a thesis and antithesis and synthesis. You need to argue rigorously and lucidly your point that you make in your essay, in your article, and that's how scholars do research. So text in focus, very important for that reason, to do a close reading, a deep dive on a particular text. And it was a focus on 20th or 21st century literature. And I did my close reading, my text in focus on the American poet and novelist Ben Lerner. He's really one of my favorite, if not my favorite, contemporary writers. My text in focus was his novel The Topeka School, which was concerned with being a young white man growing up in suburban America and the psychological damage of the popular culture through this kind of radically masculine obsession with rap music, recreational drug use, stereotypical aggressive hypermasculine behavior, and the impact that had on a generation of young Americans. Lerner links that novel all the way through to the kind of political watershed of Trump being elected president in 2016 and one of the characters becomes one of these radicalized MAGA acolytes. So it was an interesting text to do a close reading of, and to link between and to link to the contemporary moment. Of course, when we are looking at anything really from the 21st century, we must be aware that we don't have the advantage of historical perspective. It's like trying to describe your face with your nose pressed against the mirror. It's all very close up and out of focus because you are living in that contemporary time. History is very humbling because often the modes of expression, the kind of status quo of a given time, what is in vogue aesthetically and politically, these things really can shift radically. And looking back historically without being personally invested in a moment, you can just look at it neutrally and be like, wow, the Catholics and the Protestants in Elizabethan England, like, why were they at each other's throats? But it's easy for us to say that, and so you have to keep that in mind when you are reading or analyzing a contemporary text, that you have to explicitly state your blind spots, because otherwise you are just fallible, right? You just fall prey to thinking that you can provide historical range to the topics in question, when that is actually something that is one perspective in which you are quite limited. Yeah, then there were some electives, like courses that one could choose for oneself. And literature in the postcolonial world, I took this course. There was quite an emphasis on postcolonial literature in this program at the University of Amsterdam. And it's had a large focus on diasporic writing in the context of post-colonial Britain and post-Commonwealth writing cultures and socio-political settings. But it was about centering influential texts from other parts of the world, often the global south, but also across the Atlantic in Canada, for example, or in South Africa, and how these formerly colonized nations have their own rich literary traditions, and there's a strange meld, a strange tension between English, in this case English, of course, there was a French colonization, the Dutch, the Germans, and so forth, but the English and the Spanish, of course, but the English eventually came to colonize a huge amount of the non-European world, and many of these literary traditions now have this kind of fraught relationship with the English language, because it was the language of the colonizers, but it is also the global language that you need in order to make a name as an artist or writer on the global field. If you write in Swahili or in Xhosa, for example, to use the South African context, there's such a tiny reading market. So then if you want to pay the bills and make it as a writer, your best shot, your only shot really, is to write in English, or to translate your works, have them translated into English. So we did Sam Selvon, The Lonely Londoner's, an exquisite novel that I've talked about a couple of times on my channel already. Jean Rhys, of course, this is a well-known book, White Sargasso Sea, her kind of retelling of Jane Eyre's, of Charlotte Bronte's Jane Eyre, and the kind of mad woman in the attic. We had Contemporary World Literature and English Linguistics 6, The Changing English Language. Following the literary branch of the program, not planning to be a linguist and do statistical analyses of subjunctive clauses in Hamlet. No, thank you. I am not interested in statistics. I'm interested in critical engagement with the great works of literature. So I chose then Contemporary World Literature. And again, this contemporary focus. And I talked about Teju Cole already, Open City, Zadie Smith's White Teeth, looking at this idea of contemporary city. How does that compare with modern city? This shift in focus from, to global writing rather than the kind of parochial, provincial, smaller geographical range as the kind of unconscious psychogeography, let's say, of a particular perspective or narrator or voice. Really, there is now a global vision of the world, and that has to be reflected in contemporary writing. Teju Cole's Open City, an incredible novel in which a protagonist is this kind of flaneur. He's a Black American man wandering through New York City at night after work and ruminating on what he encounters there, reflecting on his strange intersectional space in society as one of the kind of cultural elite, as a somebody who's using doing research. I think he's a psychiatrist or a psychologist at some elite New York institute, but at the same time he is a black man, and he is therefore socially marked, especially at night, walking through New York City, and the tension of those vying contradictory roles. He also reflects on geographical space and cultural memory. Very memorably, a tourist comes up to the protagonist and asks him, where's 9/11? As if it's like a place, where is 9/11? How can I get to 9/11? And I think that was very poignant and effective dialogue, interesting situation to highlight the kind of absurdity and the real sort of commercialization of the contemporary world, that people want to sort of go to 9/11 as if it was like a McDonald's drive-through to like have their profound experience. For most of these courses, one needed to do a close reading. Like I talked about the importance of that, to do a longer essay making an argument, often a comparative essay, looking at least two of the texts in question. Sometimes these courses also required presentations. And then there was a whole bunch of other options here for electives. Really interesting stuff here. Authors in focus, again. So I'm just sitting here editing the video, and it's a bit of a weird way to end this particular video off. I actually ran out of time to get the whole range of courses as an English major into this video. I am a new dad, and I had to run off and change a nappy and prepare a bottle of milk. So I do apologize. That's why I've split this video up into part 1 and part 2. I don't want to rush through going through the rest of these courses, so I'm going to stop there and film part 2 of this video, in which I will go through the final courses that I took to qualify in my degree, to pass my dissertation and obtain my certificate. So thanks so much for watching. Let me know what you think of this. I look forward to seeing you guys in the next video. Take care.